We're going to now start quadratics, which is a pretty big section in the maths here now. Last year, previous years, we've spoken about as trinomials and quadratics interchangeably, but the quadratic that we're going to be dealing with, in essence, it's going to have a standard form. We spoke previously about standard forms of graphs, and in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just put down something here. Y is equal to ax squared plus bx plus c. You know that that's a standard trinomial or a quadratic, okay? And we need to factorize. Hold on. Let's just recap on the factorizing. Right? Factorizing. Step 1 was HCF, highest common factor. Step 2 was always, we go through this recipes, right? We look for difference, which is a minus sign, of two squares. Number 3, we look for trinomial, which is aka quadratic equation, okay? That's our ax squared plus bx plus c form, okay? Question of number 4, sum or difference of two cubes. Sum plus or difference, minus, okay, minus 2 cubes. That is the form a cubed plus b cubed and a cubed minus b cubed. All right? So those are our factorizing. Then the last one, if all else fails, we look for grouping. Now, let us just take the special case of a quadratic equation. I've got a couple here, okay, that I just want to just quickly revise with you. Let us take, we've got a quadratic in the form, okay, generally speaking, we took a quadratic ax squared plus bx plus c, right? And we could factorize it into those forms, and if it was equal to 0, these would then give us the roots of the quadratic, correct? So basically we said that the quadratic went through, these were the roots over there and over there. It's where it went into the ground or came out of the ground, correct? Now, let's just recap a few things with the quadratic equation. If a was greater than 0, in other words, the coefficient of x squared, if it was greater than 0 means it's positive. What does that mean? If it's positive, it means that it's a happy face, remember? Okay, it means it is pointing down. Now let's just think, any quadratic that goes down like that, this point here, remember, was called the turning point, okay? And this equation, this had a local what? It had a local minimum, because that was the minimum value that the y ever became. Now we're going to look, what if our a was less than 0? Okay, in other words, it was a negative value. Okay, it means we had an unhappy face, which then means, once again, unhappy face, the same thing, it's the turning point over there, right? And this then was a maximum value. Okay, so there's a lot of information packed in to this. The last little bit of information, please remember that C over here was the y-intercept. Okay, so yep, we've got that. And we know how to factorize these guys, right? Let's just have a look at a situation. What if we have this thing here then? We have got a quadratic equation. I'm just going to change it back to black. We've got a quadratic equation x squared plus 2x minus 5. And they say to us, simplify. Okay, we go about it. We say it's a quadratic. Therefore, it must be x and x. I go to the side and I look up the factors of 5. It's a 5 and a 1, and that's it. So what do? I say, all right, 5 plus 1 is equal to 6, and 5 minus 1 is equal to 4. But none of those add up to the coefficient of x, which is a 2. So it's not factorizing very well, is it? It doesn't factorize easily. We need another way of finding the roots. We need another way of finding the roots of a quadratic equation. Okay? Well, how do we do this? Well, there is a method, and this method that I'm going to go through with you now, it trips up a lot of people. The actual thing is just remember the recipe, right? It's really very straightforward. This is called completing the square. It's called completing the square. Right? What do I do in completing the square? Well, we are going to take this little quadratic and we say, step 1. Okay? Write it down. Okay, x squared plus 2x minus 5. There we go. That's our first thing, we put it down. The next step, okay, is we look and see, is there a coefficient of x? The coefficient here is 1. So therefore, we can ignore that step for the moment. We will come back to this. Because what if it's 2 or 3? But just at the outset, I don't want to complicate it. What do we say? We say, okay, we leave it. Step 3 is open up 2 gaps. Like so. X squared plus 2x, gap. Gap 1, minus 5, and gap 2 is behind the 5, right? So it's between the x and the constant we open up a gap. Step 4, okay? Into gap 1, always add. I'm going to put it in red. Always add the following. Half of the coefficient of x and square it. Right, let's see, what do I put in? I always add, it tells me, half of the coefficient of x, 2 over 2, and I square it. Okay? 5 into gap 2, subtract. In red again. The same thing. Okay, let's do that. So then into gap 2, there it is. Into gap 2, I'm going to subtract exactly the same thing that I had there. Okay, can you see what I've done? Into gap 1, I've added half of the coefficient. So you take the coefficient, whatever it is, divide it by 2 and square it. Like so. Okay? Please do not cut steps here. Alright? It will go wrong. Not it might, it will go wrong. Okay? Because they're going to get horrible fractions that are going to come in here. And as sure as eggs are eggs, they're just going to go haywire if you try and do too much. Step 6, okay? All right. Question 4 and 5. Question 3, 4. Question 6 is step 6 is going to be multiply out. Okay, which means basically just say that's going to be x squared plus 2x plus, what's that going to be there? 2 over 2 is 1 squared is 1 minus 5 minus 1 leaves us with x squared plus 2x plus 1 minus 6. All right? What we've got here is we've got two sections. We've got a quadratic where we've completed the square and a constant. Please note, look at that. I've got minus 6 and my quadratic over here. If I actually was to simplify this, what would we get? Let's do it. We would get x squared plus 2x plus 1 minus 6 is x squared plus 2x minus 5. That is the quadratic that we started with. All right? So we haven't actually changed. We've just moved the constant away and put another number in. We have done that to complete the square over there. All right? Now, that I always like to do because that checks my number. Let me go back to black. And let's get my black in 7. Questions, part 7. All right? Now we say, okay, factorize the quadratic. Factorize the quadratic. This one. Okay? So I factorize it, and it always goes to this. You take the square root of that term and the square root of that term. Square root of x squared is x, the square root of 1 is 1, and you put that sign between them. All right? Minus 6. Now we have completed the square. This is completing the square. Please note it is in the form, it's in a special form. Okay? We're going to use this in future as the turning point formula for a quadratic, for a parabola in essence. But this is up to where we've completed the square now. All right? Yes, we're going to solve these by putting it equal to 0, etc., etc. But that is what we have done. All right? Let's do another one, shall we? Let's go through the steps again. All right. What if we've got minus 2x squared? This is another example. Minus 2x squared minus 8x plus 6. Complete the square on this is the instruction. Okay. First of all, step 1, write it down, done. Step 2, it said, let's go back. Step 2 was check the coefficient of, now I've got a coefficient, haven't I? So I say I've got a coefficient of minus 2. Step 2 then says remove. No, I'm not going to use the word remove. Okay. Take the coefficient of x squared out as a factor. Okay, so then it becomes minus 2 bracket x squared plus 4x, correct, minus 3. Am I right? Okay, well, how would I check it? Just try and multiply out minus 2x squared plus minus 8x plus 6. So yes, it works. What do I do next? Next it says, okay, we've taken it out. Next it says open up the gaps, right? And gap 2. Right, let me just move up a little bit of electronic paper. So I've got minus 2 And here's where you work methodically. Please don't bunch up. Give yourself space, right? If you don't give yourself space, you're going to make a mistake with minuses and pluses, etc. Step 4, okay, is I'm going to add in half of the coefficient of x, all right? So into gap 1, I'm going to rewrite it for you here, x squared plus 4x plus, okay, shall I do it in red? I think so. Let's do it in red. Okay, the whole thing, all right, plus, there's my add, half of the coefficient, 4 over 2, and square it, right? Then I go back and I say minus 3 and 5, subtract half. In other words, the same thing, but just subtract it. I'm going to put that in red as well. Minus 4 over 2 all squared. And we close the bracket at that point. The next step is going to be, just move you down. The next step is going to be, what do? Multiply it out. Quick 6, multiply out. Okay, minus 2, just inside, x squared plus 4x. That is plus 4, correct? Minus 3 minus 4, which gives me minus 2 x squared plus 4x plus 4 minus 7. Can you see? Just let's do a check here. Plus 4 minus 7 should be minus 3, okay? All right, which is, yep, where we started. Okay, because the 3 was in there as the constant, remember? Okay, now let's continue. All right, that is minus 3 because where we started was the minus 3, remember? So we've added, just a quick one, okay? We've added 4 and we've subtracted 4. So we've actually not changed the equation at all. That's a useful check to do. Back to the black. Question 7, number 7. Number 7 was what? Multiply. Factorize the quadratic now. Let us look at this. Number 7 is factorize. Okay, the quad. Minus 2. And it always factorizes into, that's the square root, it's x. The square root of that is 2, and use the sign there, plus minus 7 over there. Oops, that's a square bracket. Let's just make it neat and tidy, not like so, not like so. There we go. Now the last thing, section 8, is going to be multiply is remove the square bracket. So it becomes minus 2 times x plus 2 all squared plus 14. And now we have completed the square. This is completing the square. And we have completed the square on it. All right? Okay. Now, what happens if we take this? Let us take an equation now. Minus 2x squared minus 8x plus 6, and we say equals 0, right? Now remember, this is the same one that we just did, okay? I'm just using it now as an example. I've changed it from just simplify. Remember, the top was simplify by completing the square. This is solve by completing the square. Okay, solve by completing the square. What do? Well, I do exactly the same on the right-hand side as I've done up above. until I get to the point here, minus 2, okay, in brackets, x plus 2, all squared, minus 7 equals 0. Let me just show you where that was, all right? It's here. It's at that point there, right? So I have completed the square up to that point there, all right? Now, the next thing is I say, right, I've completed the square. What can I do next? Next, I can divide through by the minus 2, leaving me with x plus 2 all squared minus 7 is equal to 0. Remove the square brackets. That is x plus 2 squared minus 7 is equal to 0. Therefore, x plus 2 squared is equal to 7. Therefore, hold on, what do I have to do now? Take the square root of both sides. Can you see? This, guys, these are going to be a lot of marks. And as you know this method and recipe, they're in the bag. Take the square root, that gives me x plus 2 equals plus or minus 7. Therefore, my final answer is x is going to be equal to minus 2 plus or minus root 7. Therefore, x equals minus 2 plus root 7, or x equals minus 2 minus root 7. Okay? And you'd obviously put that in and press SD on your calculator, because they're going to ask you to do this to either leave it in surd form. Surd form is that, or to 2 decimals. In other words, you'd use your calculator and work it out, wouldn't you? Okay? Right. That is how to find the roots of an equation by completing the square, because we've actually found the roots of it. All right. Now, this is a very, very, very important thing, and I would suggest that you take it down and learn it. A, it teaches you the process. B, it's probably something that will be asked. They say to you, okay, complete the square on the following trinomial. Okay? Solve for x in the following trinomial, but there's no numbers. What do? We follow the same recipe. Step 1 was factorize, take out the a. Therefore, a is going to be equal to x squared plus b over ax plus c over a equal to 0. Okay? That's cool so far. Now, divide by a. Okay, get rid of it. So we've got x squared plus b over ax plus c over a equals 0. So the coefficient is now gone. Okay. The next step is to do what? Well, the next step is this. You say, okay, fine. A, there. Now what do? We open up the gap, because b over a is a number and c over a is a number. X squared plus b over ax plus the gap, 1, plus c over a and gap 2, and I know I'm going to be subtracting, equals 0. Okay, so far so good. I've opened up the gap. What am I going to put in that gap? Plus b over ax, and we said we must add in half of the coefficient. What is the coefficient? It's plus b over a. So I need to add half of b over a, which is b over 2a, and square it. Okay, and now we're going to go back to black, and plus c over a, and in this one I'm subtracting the same thing, minus b over 2a all squared, like that, black. back to there, equals 0, and we scroll up a little bit on the page. What have I done? Into gap 1, I've put that, and into gap 2, I've put that. Next, we expand it all out, x squared plus b over ax plus b squared over 4a plus c over a minus b squared over 4a. Yep, check, check, done correctly. All right, then what did I say? We said factorize this. We factorize this, correct? Over here. How does that factorize? That factorizes into an x. That's the square root of that, plus the square root of this is b over 2a squared, and we basically add those together, or minus b squared over 4a, and now that equals 0. So what I do now is I just remove those brackets. Oops. I can just take those away, like so. And these are numbers. Remember, this is actually a number here, all right? And that must go to that side. That's what we do. We take it to the other side. So we end up with x plus b over 2a all squared equal to b squared over 4a minus c over a. And we add those, or we subtract them. Lowest common denominator for a. All right, and we end up with, sorry, that's 4a squared there. My bad. I thought so. B squared 4a squared. Sorry, I forgot to do that. 4a squared there. Okay, so therefore now we say that's going to be 4a squared. That's going to go into there once, leaving us with b squared minus a goes into there 4ac, like so. The next step is we take the square root, remember? We take the square root of both sides. This looks very complicated. It's not. Right? Really, it's not. It's following the same recipe, isn't it? So we've got x plus b over 2a, and I can now remove those brackets because we don't need them anymore. X plus b over 2a is equal to the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 4a squared. But now that's the square root of that over that. I can actually take that out, but let's just finish. X is equal to minus b over 2a plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a, because the square root of 4a squared is equal to 2a. So I can simplify that. Hallelujah, check this out. We now can say the x, the roots of a quadratic equation, we've got a formula. It's equal to minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Done. That is the formula. Okay? So now we can find the roots by factorizing, right? We find the roots by factorizing, always taking out the highest common factor. We can find the roots by completing the square. Now we can also use a formula. There it is. X is the roots. Well, let me just finalize this for those of you not 100% sure what I mean. Oops. X is equal to minus b plus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a, and or whichever you prefer, x is equal to minus b minus the square root b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Why? Because this little thing here gives me solution 1, that's number 1, and that's number 2. Gives us two solutions, right? And you would see that by completing the square. Remember, we did that a few moments ago. That, in essence, brings us up to, in the next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through using the formula. I'm going to go by completing the square, and we're going to do a couple of these as examples, right? But in essence, please go through that one. Remember I set out the method of completing the square. Follow the method just using the B's and the A's and the C's, all right? Pretending they're actually numbers. Because if they were numbers, that's what you do to solve this equation. Now we've just done it with A's, B's, and C's to develop a formula. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next session. Cheers, bye.